Hello Star Wars fans, and welcome to episode 113 of Journey into Legends. Today I'll be reading The Cestus Deception by Stephen Barnes. The Cestus Deception was released in 2004, and it follows Obi-Wan during the Clone Wars on a mission to the planet Ord Cestus. I've heard absolutely nothing about this book regarding the content or the quality, so I'm excited to go into it completely blind. Anyways, without further ado, let's read and review. Alright, so this book's plot centers around the planet Ord Cestus, a significant droid manufacturing planet that has begun to produce a dangerous new type of droid, the JK series, which is nicknamed the Jedi Killer. Due to how deadly these new droids are and the growing threat of Ord Cestus selling them to the Separatists, the Republic is forced to send Obi-Wan and Kit Fisto to the planet to try and dissuade the Cestians from joining the Confederacy. Overall, I didn't mind the initial setup for this plot. It's not the most exciting narrative, but it served its purpose well enough. One thing I really enjoyed about this book was that it gave us a unique perspective into the diplomatic side of being a Jedi. For most of the book, we got to see Obi-Wan navigate a very complex political landscape, and we got to see how he earned his reputation as the negotiator. However, I will admit that the first half of this book was mostly boring, since while I appreciated the idea behind this diplomatic plotline, I found the execution rather unexciting. However, the book did pick up a bit with Kit Fisto and the clones staging fake terrorist attacks, and once Obi-Wan was disgraced and exiled off of Ord Cestus and joined Kit's attack group, the pace definitely quickened. Alongside Obi-Wan and Kit Fisto, there's also an ARC trooper that we spent a significant amount of time following, a clone named Nate. At first, I really couldn't care less about this character. He felt like a complete waste of a character, and I didn't really care for his romance with Sheikah Tull, or his development into more of an individual among his brothers. But as the book went on, I started to really enjoy his character more, as well as the romance between him and Sheikah. I thought the romance aspect was going to be more prevalent, but it wasn't as ham-fisted as I feared. I did find the whole renaming aspect where Nate renames himself Jango Tat, which means Jango's brother. I found all of that to be a little bit much. Overall, I ended up really disappointed with this book. It was mostly an inoffensive and unobtrusive story about a random mission during the Clone Wars, but it also ended up being far too boring and forgettable. The plot was very bland, the world building was decent, I guess, but boring. And as for the characters, Jango Tat was really the only one here that got any development. Obi-Wan stayed fairly static, Kit was just there. I didn't even mention Asajj Ventress since she accomplishes next to nothing during this book, and at the end of the day, I just find myself completely unchanged by this book. And for me, a boring and forgettable book is almost as bad as a terrible one. And fun fact, this is actually one of, if not the lowest selling expanded universe novels, and after reading it, I can definitely see why. Next, we have an ebook tie-in to the Cestus Deception, The Hive, by Stephen Barnes. This one takes place during Obi-Wan's mission to Ord Cestus, and follows a small mission he's sent on by the Hive Council to retrieve some ancient eggs hidden by their ancestors. Obi-Wan and an ex-Ting named Jessen then journey underground through the catacombs, and it's a pretty decent little story, though I can see why it wasn't included as a part of the main novel. Next, we have Volume 4 of the Clone Wars Adventures series, which has 4 stories, starting with Another Fine Mess, which follows C-3PO and R2-D2 after they got separated from Senator Amidala during a mission. This is another one of their classic misadventures where they end up saving the day on accident. It was a decent little story, and I enjoyed it. Next, we have The Brink, in which Anakin answers a distress call from a Jedi named Sarah Keto, saving her from a dangerous threat on a space station. Now, what I really enjoyed about this story was getting to see Anakin interact with Keto, since he actually ends up killing her during the Revenge of the Sith video game. However, I found it really weird how he was flirting with her in this story, considering he's literally married to Padme. But other than that, this was a decent little story. Anyways, our next story is Orders, which follows a squad of clone commandos as they rescue a young refugee on a planet after a battle. I enjoyed their interactions with the child as they explain how they were bred to follow orders, and at the end of the story, they execute Order 66 on a Jedi. I enjoyed this story quite a bit. However, one thing that would have improved it a lot, as dark and morbid as this sounds, is if the child they rescued was instead a young Jedi Padawan whose master was killed, and the troopers ended up executing Order 66 against the Padawan, or at least trying. I know that sounds super grim and dark, especially for a children's comic like this, but I just think that there was an opportunity to tell a really memorable and gut-wrenching story, and they just didn't. But anyways, it was still a decent little story. Our last story is Descent, which follows some Wookiees, including Chewbacca and Tarful, shortly after the end of the Clone Wars. While being hunted by some clone troopers, the Wookiees lead the clones into the Shadowlands, ambushing them and leading them into a trap. I enjoyed this story quite a bit. It's awesome to see the Wookiees continue to deal with the threat of the clones, and it was great to see the Shadowlands. Anyways, thank you all for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and stay tuned for my next video, where I'll be reviewing the first book in the MedStar duology, Battle Surgeons, by Michael Reeves and Steve Perry. See ya!